transmission, so please be patient. I will go ahead and give some hints and some suggestions for getting the most out of this class to those of you who are already here. You will be interrupted, that you see if there is a way to minimize that, whether that be closing down some of allow you to get the most out of the presentation and to get the insights that are unique to you, not just the information I'm providing, but the things that will be most important for you that come up from the things that I say. So I am Susan Zink, and we are going to go ahead and get started with this. I found that we have some folks, especially with a different kind of a way of learning, such as a webinar that may take a few minutes to get onto the technology. So I want to make sure those of you who are already here get value the whole time and also not leave behind our friends who may not be on top of the technology quite as much as those of you who are already here. So I already gave you one suggestion for getting the most out of this. We are going to be together for about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on whether you have questions at the end. I do also suggest if you don't have some water nearby that you go ahead and get that for yourself. If you do have a way to take notes, that's going to be of the best benefit to you. And as I mentioned, when you're taking those notes, certainly you're welcome to write down the information I give you. I've chosen it carefully, but I also encourage you to write down those insights that come up for you. Don't let those pass. Have a document open or a notepad beside you, so when I'm mentioning bringing out a particular attribute in a child and you think of your child, when I do that, that you can capture that insight right there. So this is Nurture the Children Who Will Change the World. Bring out the superpowers in yourself and your kids. I am Susan Zink, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. I want to give a couple of other pieces for those of you who are here, but where it will not interfere with people getting the benefit from the full program if they're just joining us as we go now. So one thing is, if you have not done our Mothering Archetypes quiz, I encourage you to do that. It's real easy to find, Susan.com. If you go to the website, you can't miss it. And it will give you some individualized suggestions for your own mothering style. Things that you can do to both relax and have the confidence that we're going to talk about. Also things you specifically can pick up the pieces in doing with your children that may not be your strong suits, that may not be the things that are most easy, that don't come most easily for you. We aren't going to be talking about that very much during this, and I'll mention why when we get to our regular part of our program, but that is a resource that is available to you that I wanted to make sure that you knew. And the last thing is, I do regularly interact with people on Facebook. I'm just getting ready to start a whole new set of mothering moments on Instagram. So I encourage you to make sure that if you are interested in the things that we do in this webinar, that you look for me on those other platforms as well. So I think we've given people who weren't familiar with this technology a chance to get logged in and going with us. So I do want to go ahead and get started. This is going to be, as I said, about a 40-minute class in terms of the content. I will not be answering questions very much during the course of the program. I would pretty much like to hold those to the end, with one exception. If you do have a question where something that I've said doesn't make very much sense, or if you do need something to help you understand what I've covered, that would make it easy for you to keep going with the next part, I encourage you to put that question in the chat, and I will do my best to get to those even during the main presentation. But at the end, that's when anything about the program, any of your individual needs, I will address. Now, right before that question and answer period, I will make available 2 ways to get more support and community for this very different way of supporting your children and their genius. So I would encourage you to stay for that. 2 of those are free, and I actually would invite you and ask you to help me to put something in the chat. It can just be a hi, or it can be I'm here, or have done the quiz, anything that would just give me a little bit of an indication that the chat is working properly and that we are able to communicate back and forth that way a little bit. That would be very helpful to me. I do want to mention that this is part of a whole suite of ways that I work with mothers, but everything that I do is based in a system that I've put together that's really basically very simple. It's very different. It is radical. It is taking a radical respect approach to both you as a mother, and we'll talk about why in this program, and to your children. It is about taking radical responsibility for being the mom that you can be, and for teaching your children to take responsibility, not only for chores and things like that, but for their own happiness, which is a huge gift. And finally, it is about radical relatedness. That's what love is. It is the way that ultimately we are all related. So this is a system that you'll see runs through all of the work that I do. And if you're interested in that more, there will definitely be ways for you to find out more about that and future things that I'm doing. So what about this class? Here's the overview. We're going to go through what it's not quickly, what it's not, is it for you, and what it is. First, what it's not. Some of you are aware of the mothering archetypes that I work with. We are not going to go into those very much on this. I will mention a couple of them in relation to two of the special things that I think you need to be paying attention to bring out the genius in your children and in yourself. That is about the only reference that we'll do, but there are definitely ways to get more information on those if you would like, and the website, susan.com, is the way to do that. Now, is this for you? If you are willing to settle for your children just being happy, it's probably not, because this is different. It is about developing genius. Now, when I say that, I want you to know genius comes in many forms. This is not simply about logical or logical mathematical genius, which is typically measured with IQ scores. This is about genius that helps children succeed in the world as children and as adults in many ways and at many levels. And your children will change this world. You've probably noticed it's moving pretty fast these days, and the skills they need to be able to succeed and work are so different than what you and I needed, and certainly what my parents needed. So this is about preparing them to bring out that genius that's going to let them succeed in this new world. It is also about the synergy of superpowers, yours and your kids. You have a unique place in their lives that can't be overestimated, both in terms of your influence and the special abilities that you've brought to that. If you've paid any attention to me online, you know I have a pretty strong spiritual focus. It's not a religious focus per se, but it is about the spiritual grounding of you in that role as a mom. Now, this is about being happy, fulfilled, and contributing and having success on your own terms. That's your children, and that's you. If those are the levels of your goals, this is for you. So here's the way that the rest of our time together is going to flow. We're in the introduction right now, and then I'm going to go through the 2 essential mothering skills and 6 key activities that are most likely to help you bring out the genius in your kids. We're going to go through what gets in the way, why this approach is different than other things that are out there, and throughout the program, how do you mother from your wisdom, not from your wounds? We're not going to talk a lot about wounds and some of those shadow parts of ourselves very much, but I will reference them briefly. Then I'm going to very, very briefly let you know the ways to get more support. 2 of those are completely free without charge, but they are by invitation, and I'll explain that at about 40 minutes thereabouts in the program. And then we will have a question period that I will take questions for at least 20 minutes if people are interested in doing that. So I am Susan Zink. I am a mothering mentor. That is what I do now, and I work with visionary moms with big goals. We've already covered quite a bit of that. So you know where I'm coming from. I do have a strong Montessori education. That's my background. And if you don't know Montessori, or if you only think you do, I encourage you to reserve judgment. A lot of people have misconceptions there. And I'd invite you to look at that elegant lady on the slide in front of you looking at that little girl. Look at that rapport. That's Montessori education. That is Dr. Maria Montessori many years ago. But that way of kind of being with a child is what Montessori education is. It is about those fun things like that uh, math material that you see my youngest son working with. Yes, that is me with the 80s hair and the 80s nails. And that little guy that you see there is now 33. And the picture that you see at my wedding 13 years ago was him at that time with his older brother, Jared. So I am a mom, I'm a grandma, and I have as a lot of my base Montessori education. I've worked with at least 1,000 parents in several different regards as an administrator in Montessori schools, as a classroom teacher working with parents, many of them new to Montessori education, in transformational workshops in 3 different countries, and in private practice, both as a mothering mentor and as a movement therapist. I have backgrounds in transformational therapies as well as a master's degree in education with a specialization in Montessori. Now, my background is also working with many different people in many different ways. You see a wonderful woman from Africa who uses the training program in Montessori that I developed in her school. It is being used in schools in Africa, in Australia, in Vietnam, and in many places across the United States and in Canada. And there you get to see 2 of my 4 grandsons. One is going to be born anytime, and the one who is upside down in his uncle, my younger son's arms, is 10 at this point. So to them, I am Mima. So that gives you a little bit of sense of my background. I encourage you to mother from your wisdom. That is what everything that I put out there is about, and that is definitely what this program is about. So the first thing you need to do is claim your perfection as your kid's mom. Please know that it is really impossible to overestimate your influence on your children in 2 different ways. One way is just the day-to-day interactions that you have with them, how much, especially as when they're young, that you are able to shape the course of their lives and the habits and the other things that are make an influence on them. The other is your model. This is one of the reasons that you're going to hear me focusing so much on you and how you are with your kids. I tell people it's neurologically impossible for your children to do what you say, not what you do. Just as they absorb language from you with all of its grammar and complications, they absorb from you a way of being, whether you're confident or not confident. They absorb your worldview. So it's so important that you look to what you as a mom can do to influence them in the way that you want to be influencing them. And if you are familiar with Montessori or have done other workshops with me, you've probably seen this before, but I really can't overemphasize it. One test of the correctness of educational procedure is the happiness of the child. Well, one test of correct mothering procedure is the happiness of you. As we're talking about your influence on your child, please recognize if you are unhappy, if you are putting your needs aside, not your preferences, but if you are putting your needs aside for your children, it is going to backfire at a psychological level. You must take care of yourself so that you can be that model of a healthy person. This is especially true for your daughters, but it's true for your sons as well. If they feel bad about taking you from what you would prefer to be doing, and they do pick up on those things, it's not going to serve them. So you've got to take care of you. So here's your first essential skill. You need to claim your confidence, the courage of your convictions. What this is going to do is take you out of habit and put you in choice and power with your kids. Now, those images you see there are from my archetypes, and the reason that I have them there is I want you to understand that this is going to be easier for some of you and harder for some of you, and that confidence looks different ways. You see a somewhat imposing confidence in my little graphic of our Empress archetype, and you see a little softer version of confidence in that founder image that's on the right. So what this is about is you recognizing you have got to claim your wisdom, your power. And I'll tell you more why that's so important as we move through some of the other elements of the program. And I'm going to take a little moment to take a drink while you've got something that you could look at that's a little bit interesting. So why is it important that you are confident? First and foremost, that above everything else is what makes your child feel safe. We have seen mothers go through horrendous experiences, and because they were able to feel confident that they would get their families through it, the children came through it with certainly having been affected, but not nearly what they would have if they had seen their mother and the adults around them falling apart. This is true in the gentler experiences in your family as well. If you are confident in setting the boundaries for your children, they are going to feel safer, absolutely. It is also empowering. When you model confidence, you empower them to create confidence from your model. And finally, it supports harmony in your home. You are wiser. I don't care even if you have the most brilliant, precocious, um, prodigy in the world, you are still wiser. You have the life experience, you have the insight, you have the perspective that literally for 99% of children isn't even cognitively possible until they're about 8 or 9 years old. You've got to use that perspective, use that wisdom with them. You do need to take responsibility to develop that wisdom. I congratulate you being here with me either live or on the replay of this program, because this is a way to make you ready to approach the challenges of your children and this time in our society. Confidently educate yourself so that you do understand their cognitive abilities, their special uh, abilities, and are able to, from a place of education, take charge, because that really is what your children need all the way up through the time that they leave your home, but especially in those first 6 to 8 years. When you worry, you make it double. Most of you probably have heard the song "Don't Worry, Be Happy" from Bobby McFerrin. That is where this quote came from. And please recognize that if you are going into doubt, because doubt and worry go hand in hand, you are only making things worse for you and your children. So if all these kids have genius, because that's what I've been promoting as I promoted this webinar, the idea that your kids, all children, have these remarkable abilities that they need to develop so they can give their deepest gifts in the world. Why aren't they showing it? Why aren't we seeing this in children across our culture and many um, wealthy cultures, because we are very wealthy. If you know very much about the statistics around the world, even the poorest Americans are wealthy by the standards of many countries. So what does get in the way? Mindset, habits, social norms, and child view. So we're going to go through each one of those. And child view is a completely made up term, but it has to do with worldview. Your mindset is greatly influenced by what you believe about the way that the world works. And child view is how you believe children work and what you believe is normal for those children. So let's see if we can get some of those out of the way. One of the most brilliant professors that I was fortunate enough to work with personally was Lorna Benjamin. She was one of the experts for the DSM-4. I think that's a version or two ago, but it's the way that they diagnose mental challenges in our country. And personality disorders are considered one of the most challenging mental challenges that there are. And she was convinced that what you experience as a child, not only with your parents, but particularly in your home, is what shapes the world that you know and what is your normal. So let's look at mindset a little bit. We talked about the first part of it, confidence. You have to claim that wisdom so that that is what comes through to your child, that mindset that things are going to work out and I'm going to make sure with you that they work out. And then the worldview. I encourage you to look at research, but be careful. Um, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about some things from the American Academy of Pediatrics when we get to our 6 activities, but they are far from perfect. And, the norm in the Japanese culture is for children to sleep with their parents, and they have one of the lowest rates of sudden infant death syndrome there is. Yet our American Academy of Pediatrics continues to tell parents that this is a dangerous practice. Now, if mothers are exhausted, that's a dangerous practice too. So look at the possibilities. Do no harm to the best of your ability, but look for the possibilities, whether it's the research that you're reviewing or what your children are capable of. We all know lead is a horrible danger to our children. We definitely don't want them putting anything in their mouth that has lead in it. When there is a clear danger, obviously do no harm, but otherwise look for those possibilities. Habits. Now, we are going to go into this a little bit more when we get to the second essential skill for moms, but first you need some background. Your habits, particularly the anchors of routine, are one of the most powerful influences you have. Whatever is normal gets less resistance. Think about using car seats. For most people in our culture, if your child is more than a few months old, being in a car seat is just normal, and so you don't get very much resistance. What if setting out clothes the night before school just becomes the new normal? After you've done that for 3 weeks, there's not only not going to be any resistance, but there's a momentum. This is just what happens next. So it is essential that you use the power of habit, you use the power of routine to create the new normal that you want for your children and for your household. Social norms. This is just what other people around you are doing. If everyone in your neighborhood sends their child to Allison to get piano lessons, that is a social norm. Now, that kind of social norm is a little less common these days, but everybody doing soccer in your neighborhood, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And sometimes it extends to other things. If you decide to restrict access to electronic devices, will likely get social pushback. So what are you wisest to do in these situations? You need to proactively choose. You need to proactively choose 2 things. First, the environments that influence you and your kids. Um, I don't like to be negative, but this is one of the most powerful examples that I have, and so I'm going to go for it. When I was working, between the time that I first had a Montessori school and before I worked in large public and charter Montessori schools, I worked in public schools in Utah, in the Salt Lake area. And I did a lot of work on movement therapy and aiding children in their learning through some kind of non-traditional practices, but that are very safe, that they're all movement or moving your eyes or, things like that. And I worked with some school teachers, and I was a little bit appalled because a lot of times I was based out of the break room. And the negativity in there was really, really upsetting to me because I know if people are negative in one place, they're going to take that negativity into other environments. So I encourage you to be discriminating, be selective. Where are you going to let your children be influenced and by whom? And then when do you go against the norms? If it is normal in your neighborhood for, everybody to have their children take soccer with a coach who's not very savvy with children's emotions, do you want that for your child? You need to choose when you're going to go against the norms and when you're going to stay within them. And if you're conscious with it, you can make wise choices. So what isn't working to create exceptional abilities? It's not what's not working at all, but these are some things that a lot of people consciously, or for that last one up there, unconsciously choose in order to attempt to bring the best to their kids. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with private schools. You're going to see in a minute, if you don't know me very well, I'm huge on Montessori education. You probably already got that. But many private schools that parents spend thousands of dollars on are not bringing out any exceptional abilities any more than public schools or other schools in the neighborhood. Many of the classes, many of the tutoring experiences that parents are taking their children to are not putting them any further ahead. And when I say sports, this is kind of that last example I gave. when it's just what all the other kids are doing, that's not likely to bring out your children's best. And I'll explain more about that in a few minutes. Therapy, obviously, sometimes therapy is exactly what children need. If they are struggling, if there is some real pathology going on, this may exactly be where they need to be. But I put it up here because this is where a lot of parents are spending their money, picking up the pieces after things didn't go so well. That's what this class is about, is encouraging you to be proactive and preventative of some of the challenges that could come into your child's life if you are not being really careful about what comes first. And then mom guilt. Don't go there. Choose not to do what I suggest in here, but be in that confidence first and foremost. That's going to serve the child much more than you feeling bad about what you chose not to do. So here is the reason that I mentioned the whole private school thing and in the context of you making your careful choices. If you're really familiar with Montessori education, you may know that it's a very different model. It's about the educator taking a kind of a in the corner role. You can see mentor here. That's the educator's place or the mom's place. You can see the environment, that part of the job is for that person to connect the learner to the environment, and the learner is at the top. That's where we keep our eyes. And if you go and observe at Montessori schools in your neighborhood, there's a good chance that some of them don't look like this at all. So this is where your mom wisdom has to prevail. You need to educate yourself about your child's educational opportunities, about what schooling you're going to choose, and make sure it really is what you think it is. If you're sending your child to soccer because you want them to learn working as a team and cooperating, make sure cooperation is really one of the things that's happening there. So, child view. What you think is normal for your children and for those like you, let's get into that. So what is not normal, even if it is typical in many of our communities? It's not normal to have a short attention span or to resist helping and participating, fighting, tantrums, irritability. These are not the normal ways that children act. And a lot of the reasons I know this is because of children who are called the new children by people writing about Montessori education 100 years ago. And they were writing about the same things that people criticize Montessori children or criticize whether or not it's a real thing. But people were able to see it. They were able to see children behaving in a different way, not only in a school setting, but with their families, and struggling to learn, lacking interest in things other than electronic devices. This is not normal. So what is? You see a lovely little picture that we had a chance to take of my grandson on an Atlantic beach when we took a trip to visit family last year. Now this is not what he looks like most of the time. Okay, he's just turned 3, but this is normal. This kind of peace, this kind of quietness is also a normal part of our children. Collaborating with their parents and their siblings to take care of their home. Remember what I said about habit. If you set something up as normal, it just becomes normal, and it also can become a deeply satisfying and rewarding part of children's lives. Treating people with kindness at a basic level from age 2, when they are still very self-centered and normally and naturally and developmentally should be, up to age 5, when their empathy and their habits of kindness really can be very well developed if you're spending time on them. Problem solving at increasingly independent and sophisticated levels of mastery. This is one of the things that we see in really good programs for children, Montessori and others as well. A lot of the after school programs that we're seeing coming up, building things, creating things, that helps children become brilliant problem solvers. Choosing to do or practice a skill with focus and enthusiasm for hours at a time. Now, some of you came to this class that we're in right now by seeing a little bit of a story of my younger son, and he is the one that a friend did say made him realize bouncing off the walls was not just an expression. This young man, who resisted almost everything that he was asked to do that wasn't his idea in our home for about 16 years, got himself to karate for 6 years, walked to a studio within walking distance of my home. Why? Because that was what he chose. When children choose with enthusiasm, they develop focus and it spreads. It spreads beyond just the things that they have initially chosen to things that they need to do as well. And one of those things is self-care, caring for their personal self, putting on their clothes, keeping themselves clean, taking care of their home environment, including their belongings and shared belongings and spaces with other family members. This is all normal, even if it isn't typical. And there's our last one. Clearly demonstrating expertise in 1 to 3 areas of creativity, athletics, or knowledge by age 8. If they are given the chance to develop those interests and develop the self-discipline that has to go with them in order to create mastery, which is really when things start getting fun. Think about playing a musical instrument. Yes, this is normal. So here's essential skill number 2. You have got to take back your time and your kids' time. Now there you see an image from our archetypes. That's the alchemist. For some of you, this is going to be much more second nature than it is for others. And so you have to work with that. One of the things that I encourage mothers to do is make sure that they are not attempting to do things that are so outside of what is typical for them that it becomes a strain. Setting up a schedule is essential. Setting up boundaries and guidelines is essential. But scheduling every moment isn't going to serve in the first place. And if that's not your thing, it's just going to be trying to work too much against your normal flow. But if you're going to learn, if you're going to master something, it is at one level a product of these 3 things. How frequently you do it, how much intensity you bring to it, that's where that interest comes in. That's where my son being, drawn to the martial arts brought that intensity. He was choosing it. That brings intensity. Interest brings intensity. The mastery helps bring intensity because you get better at it and you get drawn to get better at it. And then duration. How often you're doing it and for how long. This is how we learn things. That's not all that's going on, but that is a lot of the nuts and bolts on the ground. So, developing genius. I told you this is not purely about logical and mathematical genius. It would be ridiculous to say that all children are going to develop that. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about all the kinds of genius that you see listed here. Yes, academic types, whether it be logical and mathematical or written language, more of a verbal language ability that goes into the social and the moral side, being kind, generous, loving, persuasive. Whatever you think of what has happened in the American culture over the course of the election cycle, we have certainly seen people being more gifted and less gifted at persuasion. This is something our children will show us might be their gifts and can be very, very productive to develop. Graphic arts, performance art, music, sports, dance, and health. Now, the reason that I put that in there with athletic is we are seeing people being paid for helping others have better lives. If your child becomes a very successful athlete, maybe overcoming not even having that great of a skill to begin with, that might be a door to a career that neither you nor that child could possibly foresee while they're enjoying athletics. So keep a wide view, keep a broad lens on what the geniuses that we are seeking to develop, because all of these can potentially be both rewarding in a professional situation and a personal situation. So depth, satisfaction, strong bonds. This is what happens when we take control of our time. We do the activities that are deeply relaxing for us, not, a Netflix binge. These are the kinds of things that create strong bonds within our families as we do them together, as we plan them together. Routines, boundaries of respect, where you are making sure that your children respect you and making sure they respect one another. This is part of what this taking control of your time is about. You know better than your kids the best use of their time and the general options. Now, it doesn't mean you're controlling every minute, far from it. If we are not developing our children's capabilities, there's a good chance that there's either too little structure or too much, too little choice or too much, decisions that we're asking them to make that they're not developmentally ready to do, or that they aren't prepared to do because we just didn't teach them. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So this is about freedom within a carefully prepared environment based on values, choice within structure, you choosing and then they choose. This is the way that we provide what children under age 18, and particularly under age 8 or 9, need. So what is typical, even if it's not working? Well, here it is. Friends, 5 hours watching television. This is daily. This is not a week thing. And I know some of you would never be putting up with this in your home, but you need to understand this is what's crowding out some of the things we're going to talk about in a minute. And it's really important to recognize that if you want your children to do the things we're going to talk about, you can't have television, screen time, mindless homework. I'm not going to go a lot into that here because this isn't about advocating with your school system in terms of our central topic, but sometimes you need to do that. If homework's coming home that is not serving your children, you need to think about saying something. And time outside. It's pretty tragic. And I know some of it is based in fear. Some of it is fear that's not founded, and that's something that we have to educate ourselves about. How safe are the environments around our home? And do we need to let our children explore them a little bit more within safe guidelines? So what makes sense to do instead? Support overall health. We need activities that are going to help prevent the obesity that is happening in way too many of our children and our adults. Activities that are deeply satisfying. I mentioned that. A lot of what we do clicking around on the television or on our devices is not satisfying. It's just pleasant. And then it actually exhausts us over time. Things that are backed up by research and following your child's better angels. If you allow them to just do whatever is easy, they're not always going to choose what's going to bring out their best, whether that be their genius or their just basic level kindness. So what are those proven activities that are worth your child's time? Some of them aren't what's easy for us. I'm a little bit more fastidious than some moms, and when children get dirty, it can be not so much fun for me. But here's where we have to look. What is going to be best for our kids? Here's where if we understand our own tendencies, we can make some wise choices about how we can best support them, the ones that are easy for us as well as the ones that are not so easy. So, work. Now remember, I'm in grandma mode now, and so the photo that I had available was when my grandson was helping us make cookies a few years ago. And work can be so much fun if we manage it the right way, but mostly it's satisfying. It's very satisfying for our children to know they've made a contribution. Some of you may have heard me tell the story about my older son. When I was a full-time student, he was 8 years old. He literally took on most of the work in the house except for the cooking and some of the more in-depth cleaning in the kitchen. It was huge, and he knew it. He knew he was part of my success in school. He knew he was a huge part of our success as a family. That's a gift. Kindness and collaboration. I was on a podcast today, and I will make sure that the list knows when it's going to go live. So if you're interested in that, but we talked about struggles on the playground and children who are being asked to follow the golden rule, but nobody's telling them how. We actually have to practice with them. We have to teach them how to respond when people speak unkindly. We have to teach them how to respond when people exclude them from a game, and we have to teach them how to collaborate. We have to teach them how to deal with using their belongings and their siblings' belongings in ways that are kind, whether they're old enough to know how to share or not. We have to teach them, and we have to teach the foundational skills, including delaying gratification. so many moms I'm seeing make a huge mistake. They don't want their children to suffer. They don't want their children to be happy for even a moment. And they are unfortunately building a foundation of short attention spans and a self-centeredness that's not going to serve their children. Their children are not going to be well liked unless they can delay gratification. That's part of social genius. Skills instruction. You see a little gal here who is learning to put on her own ski boots. Obviously, she's at a stage where she needs a lot of help. And, some things they're not going to be able to do on their own. Those ski boots are really hard. I mean, physically hard, and you need a lot of strength to do it. But if your children have Velcro shoes, they literally can be dressing and undressing themselves at age 3. By 7 or 8, they can be caring for the yard, their home. They can be learning to join you in complex hobbies. Arts, if you know how to draw, they can be learning to draw from time with you. Community service, one of my most treasured memories was when my aunt, I'm an only child of an only child, and so this was such a precious time when I would get to go stay with my great aunt. And she took me with her to her church, and I got to be kind of the main person serving at the spaghetti dinner. And it was huge. I'd never done anything like that. I felt so important. I felt so capable to help with that big event in that way that was so significant for her and for me. So give your children these opportunities. Reading books. Now, you may have thought, especially with my Montessori background, if you know Montessori, that I would be talking about teaching your children to read, and that's not what I'm talking about so much here. Yes, they need to learn to read, and they need to learn to read at a developmentally appropriate time and in a developmentally appropriate way, and a good Montessori school is one of the absolute best ways to do that. But I'm talking about a culture of books. I'm talking about having books available that are at your child's level, and you don't have to buy them. Most of us have public libraries, at least in the US, that are very easy for us, especially if we make friends with the children's librarian, to do this. If you are not reading aloud to your children through their teens daily, and if you are not doing little tricks like you can stay up an extra 15 minutes or half an hour if you're reading, and only if you're reading. If you're not doing some of those things to foster a culture of reading in your home, you are definitely not doing all you can to foster your child's genius. When they are looking at a television, they are taking in information in a very low level way. One of the reasons I encourage you to severely limit television, my children did not have television at all. We had videos. We had no television in my home. They did have television at their grandma's. They did have television other places, but not in my home, is because of what comes in. Those PBS programs, when the children are having conflicts that they resolve, some of your children are learning how to do the conflicts, not how to do the resolution. That's not what tends to happen with books. We, when we are doing books, are thoughtful, and we have a chance to be thoughtful with our children. Movement, well-organized movement, a chance to develop the senses outside, in nature, and with music. This is obviously so important to their physical health. It's so important to their emotional health. And it is one of the best ways to give them some of that thoughtful time, because that's the last piece. I think it is. Let me just do a little peek. Yeah. This is the last activity. And I'm not going to go a lot into it because especially the visualization is kind of complicated. I will tell you that I, as good a reader as I was, as early as I was, as advanced as I was, because I was advanced academically until they threw me into a self-learning algebra class at ninth grade. For the most part, other than that, I succeeded really well academically, except for two things. I had to work really hard for the math skills, and I was a horrible speller until I was 28 years old. And the reason was I couldn't see the words. The only way to be a good speller of the English language is to be able to visualize the words. And it is a skill that can be taught. I couldn't do it until I was 28, and by the time I was 30, it was there. So I wanted to fill that in a little bit because I had talked about that in relation to this class. But your children need time to reflect. They need to be able to think about their experiences. They need to be able to make choices, walking outside in nature, spending time talking to you about a book and then thinking about it. These are the kinds of activities that are going to bring out their genius, are going to allow them to show you their genius. So how do you do this? And I know that I'm running a little bit behind, but I think we're doing pretty well. We'll be on to questions in about 2 minutes, so we're not too far behind, and I hope that that's not going to create a problem for anyone. So key number one is have a plan. You have got to have strategies. You've got to put those routines in place that create these habits that are going to bring out the genius in your children. You've got to have support systems. You've got to make sure that if those around you are not doing these strategies, if they're not limiting screen time, the American Academy of Pediatrics says your child under 5 should be looking at a screen for an hour a day or less. Your child 18 months to 2 years should not be looking at a screen at all ever. From 5 and up, they're now trying to get parents to see that the screen time is crowding out these things I'm telling you about. All of the research says if your children are spending more than an hour or two in front of a screen, they're probably crowding out movement that will keep them healthy, reading that will help them think deeply and explore knowledge strategies of genius. So it's so important that you put these systems into place. And you need the support systems to do that unless that's what everybody in your neighborhood is doing. So you need to look at the time, you need to look at energy, and you need to look at old patterns. You need to have in the moment strategies. So you need to have a way to recognize what's going on with your children in the moment. You need to interact with them in ways that are respectful and that will allow you to notice those little seeds, those little indications of something that they could become really good at. And you need to fill the pantry strategies. This is setting up the routines. This is the plans. This is choosing the environments you will and will not engage in for yourself and for your kids. This is making sure that they're not taking in conflict from a screen when you want them to be learning kindness and collaboration. Your children are probably more capable than you know, and that we definitely talked about that in regards to the skill instruction and them becoming independent in a lot of their self-care and their care of the environment. And they need you to believe in them. They don't need you to do it for them. They need you to believe in them, and they need you to guide them. So key number 2 is set high standards. This is castles in the clouds, castles in the air, and then building the foundations under them. If you don't hold out the possibility that your child might do something truly amazing that is going to contribute to our culture in a way that you can't even imagine right now, you are shortchanging, because who better than you might see that? Who better than you might see that little spark of musical genius or community building genius, much less academic genius? Oh, sorry, back up one more time. So how do you build these foundations under them? You've got to set up support systems, and you've got to take advantage of the superpowers in yourself and in your children. You've got to make the most of what you've already got going for you and what you can develop by doing things like educating yourself in a way that most people are not bothering to do. So I have 2 special invitations for you to get support and community, and I am going to pull up a way for you to actually click on that, and I'm looking to make sure. It looks like it should be up there for you. What this is a clarity and creativity call. Now, let me tell you very briefly what that is and what it can make available to you. It is a way to spend time with me on the phone, or at least to apply to spend time with me on the phone, to find out where you could make the most difference really quickly with your children, to get clear on where you are doing things that work and things that are not working, where you can engage your creativity and borrow some of mine to find out how you can do that in the quickest way that works best with your children. Now, if you apply for a clarity and creativity call, here's what happens. It makes you eligible to be part of a private Facebook group. Pardon me, I'm going to clear my throat. Now, some of you may even be in that group already. It's called Mom Up, and it is getting reworked, because here's what I have found. I have found that unless we set a standard, the high standard that you saw me represent in this class, unless we set that, people fall into problems. They fall into not going deep with their way of supporting other moms. And that's just not interesting to me anymore. There's a lot of groups out of there. There's a lot of mom blogs with 30 ways to do this and 20 ways to do that. That's great. It's just not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in a really high standard. So even in that free Facebook group, that's what's going to start happening. So if you are interested in that, I encourage you to apply for one of these calls, even if you're not, even if I'm not able to choose you as one of the 10 people over the next 2 weeks that have one. If you do that, you will still get an invitation to the private Facebook group, most likely, because if you have listened to this class and you're interested in going that direction, you probably would qualify for that. The call is completely free. Those are the two free options. And the call is also to help you know what the options are to have high access to me in working with me to help you bring out the best in your kids. So what I'm going to leave you with as we move into our question time is choose consciously from your wisdom and start today. No matter what happens with your interactions with me after this, choose something that you wrote down. Choose something that's tickling your brain right now that you're going to do differently to be the best mom that you can possibly be with your kids. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at our chat. So I do not see any questions in there yet. I would invite you to do that if you have a child who has already been perhaps showing some indication of some genius in one of the areas that I mentioned or something else, and you would like some suggestions there, I would be happy to do that. You don't have to do full sentences. If you want to say, can you talk a little bit about somebody who's athletically inclined, or can you give me some more suggestions on how to limit screen time? Or if you just put screen time question mark there, I'll riff on it. So this is one of the benefits of being on a class like this live, is that you do have the chance to ask some questions to get some specific feedback from me. And if you would like to do that, I would really love to address those things that are most interesting to you. So as I said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown question. You can put a word up there, and I'll do my best to address it, and you can put a yes or a no. Now, until I see something come up, there is a little bit of a delay in the chat. Until I see something come up, because we do still have quite a few people who are engaged with us on our class, I will mention something about the support. Whether you are interested in the Mom Up group that I moderate or something else, please don't underestimate that need to have people around you who share your values, people around you who are at least in general terms choosing some of the ways of setting high standards for the way that your children spend their time. It will make it so much easier for you. If they have friends, if they have other children their age who also are getting to stay up a half an hour late to read a book or whatever, it's going to reinforce that. And I also encourage you to look carefully at the environments your child's in. I was blown away when I read in the book Nurture Shock that one of the things they found was that children watching some public television shows were learning from those shows ways to irritate their siblings. And obviously this was nobody's intention. I mean, it's PBS. If you follow me on Facebook, you probably know I'm a huge fan of PBS. But there is so much that if we're not paying attention can kind of slip in there and influence our children. And screen content is one of those things that is it's just a different quality of influence. And this is the reason that I believe that the American Academy of Pediatrics is right in being so stringent in their guidelines. And I honestly wish they had kept the more stringent guidelines for older children, because it was no more than 2 hours up through age 18 until they revised them. And they almost had to because of the way that some of our schools are going. And it's very, very troubling to me, because a lot of the things that I see going on, a lot of that short attention span and being short with other people that I see, I do believe is strongly influenced by not only what's on screens, but the way that content goes into the brain. It's a completely different story than when you are talking about it. It's a completely different story than when you see a conflict on a playground and then watch people work it out and maybe go and tell your mom about it on the drive home from school. This is one of the reasons why I'm actually very liberal in my advice to parents about the books that their children read. If your child is able to read the book himself or herself, I do, yeah, I want you to pay attention, because there's some books out there that aren't worth your while. But if they read it, what goes in is really different than if they see it on television or on a movie or on a game screen. So be really, really um, extra diligent there. Well, I am not seeing questions come up. So I will take that you got what you came for, at least at some level here. I will encourage you to apply for those calls. I would love to spend time with those who are ready to take mothering to a whole new level, who are ready to set a new standard, who are ready to say, yes, I believe my child has genius. I may not know what it is yet, and it may not be genius as the American school system defines it, but it is. There are gifts there this world needs, and I am going to do everything in my power as a mother to make sure I don't die with the song still in me. My child doesn't die with the song still in him or her. I am going to make sure I do everything in my power to bring out those gifts, so that not only will my child be happy, but he or she will be fulfilled. I've heard someone I admire a lot say that when we lost Robin Williams, it was because he never learned to be fulfilled, as successful as he was. I want our children to be happy. I want them to be fulfilled, and I want them to be successful on their own terms. Those of you who've seen some of the stories about my family know that my two sons chose to define success in very different ways, but I believe they both have found success on their own terms, and I encourage you to do everything you possibly can to do that for your children, to bring out that success on their terms, and to take that standard as high as you dare, because you will be given the support you need if you do that. So I'm going to sign off. I'm going to thank those of you who were here live. I am also going to thank those of you who are engaging with me through the replay. And I'm going to close with this. If you are on the replay, you are certainly invited to apply for those clarity and creativity calls. I will keep filling those slots until they are gone. If you are not on live, if for some reason the link that is part of the webinar proper is not working for you, all you need to do is email me, susan@susan.com, spelled that way that you do have available to you on the webinar, SOUZZANN. So it's susan@susan.com. Email me directly, and I will certainly send you that link to apply. If you are only interested in being in the Mom Up group, you can also email me. I do want to be inclusive, but I'm only interested in having people who are ready to take this high standard as their way of doing things. We've got to work together as a community of mothers. We've got to create the changes that we want for our children. And thank you for participating with me this way. And please, please let me know how I can support you in mothering from your wisdom.